What's up, guys? How's everybody doing today? Happy Wednesday, happy hump day, happy wealth and wellness Wednesday. Gosh, we are heading into the middle of October. It's hard to believe. It seems like just yesterday the calendar flipped and now here we are almost mid-October. Planes overhead. Not to speak up. But anyway, so welcome in. As people are coming on, let me introduce myself for those of you who may not know who I am. My name is Marci Batiste. I am your ultimate power coach, America's #1 reality-based success and recovery trainer. What does that mean exactly? It means that we take a reality-based approach to everything that we do in our life, relationships, and our business. And so what I'm here to talk about, Wealth and Wellness Wednesdays really are just a time for us to kind of get together, for me to reach out, share some information. I've had over 30 years worth of banking and finance experience. And so really taking this time now at this stage in my career as an entrepreneur to be able to truly start giving back to my community and sharing some of the information and the nuggets and the tips that I've learned. Many of you know that I have a credit repair business called Ultimate Power Credit. So definitely talking about credit is one of the things that I always like to do. But there are also 5 P's of wealth and wellness that I continue to go over because I truly believe until we get our money right, everything else is going to struggle. We're going to constantly be starting out behind the 8 ball. So those 5 P's of wealth and wellness are really truly principles that I live by, principles that I use in my own personal life, in my own businesses, and in relationship with other people. And so for me to be able to share those to you with you all is a huge opportunity. So those 5 P's though are: be present. You got to show up. You got to show up for yourself. You got to show up for what you're going to do. If you're running a business, you got to show up for your customers and your clients. It's about being positioned, making sure that you're in alignment, that you have things in place where they need to be in order to be successful. It's, being patient. Things don't get messed up overnight. They're not going to get fixed overnight. Be persistent. Don't give up. Don't be that girl or that guy that stops 3 feet from gold. Okay, keep going. Be persistent. Know what your target is. Identify that and continue to move forward towards that. And the 5th one is the process. You have to have processes in place that are going to allow you to be successful. Systems are very, very important. You have to have a process in place. So those are the 5 P's of wealth and wellness, principles that I often, share with my clients and principles that I also live by. So today, our topic is death and finance, which people don't really like to talk about either one, but coming from a banking background for many, many years, I saw what happens when you don't have those tough conversations and you don't talk about death and you don't talk about finances and you aren't prepared and it happens suddenly, especially, then you're just really caught off guard. And so I think if 2020 hasn't shown us anything else, it has shown us one thing I've always told clients is life happens while you're making other plans, right? You can have the best laid plan and think you know what way you're going, and then something happens and it's gonna throw you a curveball. It's gonna knock you off your square. Life happens while you're making other plans, but guess what? So does death. And I think that is one thing that 2020 has definitely showed us. I can tell you from personal experience, my own daughter does not want to have this conversation with me. I've tried to talk to her about what happens after my death, but because I know that, then that tells me, because she's not even able to have this conversation with me in life, that's not the person I want handling things if something happens to me. She's not going to be emotionally equipped to be able to do the things that she needs to do to handle financial matters if and eventually when something happens to me. So that's the biggest thing. Making sure that the people that we have around us are prepared And that preparedness is our job. Like, it sounds weird that you're responsible for preparing for things after your death, but really, truly, you are. I remember as a banker, little old lady, her husband died, had a heart attack. They had been married for, I don't know, 50 or 60 years. She didn't even know how to use a checking account. So it can be very, very basic financial matters that we have to make sure our loved ones are prepared and are aware of. And then it can be some of the bigger things. Hey, Terry, what's going on? It can be some of the bigger things. And that we're going to talk about some of those bigger things today. I'm not really going to dive into checking and savings because I think for the most part, people understand those products and those services. If you don't, private message me and we will definitely have a conversation about it, because I want to make sure that you guys have the tools that you need to be successful financially and physically in your lives, relationships, and your businesses. So today we're actually going to talk about credit, of course, and we're going to talk just a little bit about insurance. I'm not an insurance agent, so I'm not going to dive into that, but insurance is a part of the death process. And it's a piece that we oftentimes in our communities miss because we don't expect death to happen. So like I said, life happens when you're making other plans. Death happens when you're making other plans. You have to plan to live, and you have to plan for when you eventually die. And if you don't, you really do leave your loved ones in a potentially compromising position as far as their preparedness financially and emotionally. What are they going to do? And so some of the things that we can do on the front end will help make their situation, their lives, whatever, their transition easier on the backside when we're not here. And so today we're going to talk, like I said, about credit. We're going to talk about insurance. And those both go into the positioning and the process. So if you're wondering where those fall in the 5 Ps, that's what those are. That's positioning, making sure you have things in place, and then the process. How is it all going to handle? How does it all fit together? And so, a lot of times people think about, when they think about death, they think about insurance, okay? They don't think about credit. The other thing they don't think about are wills and trusts. And we're going to talk today about more in depth. Like I said, I'm going to skim over insurance pretty much. We understand insurance is necessary, but whether you have it or you don't have it, whether you choose term life or whole life, that's going to be your personal decisions. I will tell you that term life is a little bit cheaper. And it covers you for a period of time. It's life insurance for a specific period of time, maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years, versus whole life, which builds cash value. It costs a little bit more, but it covers you throughout your entire life. And so based on that, then there's premiums that you pay, and depending on which type of insurance you buy, that's going to be what determines your premium, along with your specific health conditions and things like that. But I would refer you to a licensed insurance agent if you want to talk about insurance, because that is not my circle. But wills, trusts, and credit are my bag. Okay, that's where I live at. That's the world that I kind of grew up in. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the difference between a will and the difference between a trust. And I want you all to think about how many times you have seen like a GoFundMe account, and it's set up, so and so died unexpectedly. The family is left to try and pick up the pieces as far as how do I fund this funeral? How do I pay for these last expenses? Are there any remaining debts? That sort of thing. Everything from car washes, GoFundMes, like chicken dinners. We've seen it all. And what it amounts to is death happened while people were making other plans, or they weren't planning at all. And for the people, my clients that work with me, and for my circle, and those of you who follow me on social media, it's important for me to give you all the tools and at least be able to start the conversation. We're certainly not going to, in 30 minutes, wrap this up in a big pretty bow and you're just going to go off and be prepared. But it's going to give you the tools to kind of start having some of those conversations, very difficult conversations in many cases. For wills and trusts, a lot of people think that, like, if you're not rich, that you don't need to have a will or you don't need to have a trust. That's not true. That is not true. That is not true. You have to, you should all, everyone needs to have at least a will. And we're going to talk about the differences between the two. So a will would be, basically what a will does is it allows you to put in writing all of your last wishes, right? So you're going to talk about in a will, and this is particularly important for those of you who have small underage children. If you have children under the age of 18, you need to have a will. You need to have a will. I don't care if you're flat broke, you need to have a will. And this is why. Because the will is going to allow you to put in writing who you want to have guardianship over your minor children. Because I have seen numerous times where if you don't say that, and you're the primary caregiver, let's say you're a single parent and you don't have a will in place and you don't lay those wishes out, guess what? A court decides. Somebody who doesn't know the players, somebody who doesn't know your children, is left to decide your children's fate for their rest of their life, basically. Because the court will decide who's going to be responsible for those children for the remainder of their childhood and into their young adulthood. That's not necessarily the person that you want taking care of your kids, okay? And I'm not going to go into family relationship stuff or any of that. It's neither here nor there. The fact is, if you don't take away anything else from this today, if you have minor children, you need to have a will. I don't care if you're flat broke, because that is what's going to tell the courts your wishes for who is supposed to take care of these children. And the last thing you want to do is leave your children and the custody of your children in the court's hands, okay? Because they could end up with someone who is not the most responsible person, or whatever the case may be, just somebody that you don't want them to be with. So keep that in mind. The will is about your minor children. As far as the financial piece of having a will, it's better than nothing, but not as good as having a trust as far as passing your financial and your financial assets. Okay, so if you have investment accounts, you own real estate, you have savings, you have checking, you have money somewhere, even if it's just a little bit, you guys, particularly if it's not a lot. Let's say you got $5,000. If you only have a will, then the will has to go to the courts. It has to go to probate, and the executor, a person who's responsible for it, is going to be assigned to it. But that all takes time. Okay, it all takes time. And even with the will, you're going to say who's responsible for your financial assets, but you're not directly designating where they go. And even when you do, it still has to all go through probate, which takes time. It can take 6 months, it can take 12 months, it can take longer, okay? The trust avoids probate, okay? Trust avoids probate. So in other words, it avoids your assets having to go into the court system. And because the will would require that it goes into probate, and then fees are tacked on based on the size of your estate and things like that, it can get pretty costly. And most times, if you've got assets and all you have is a will, you're going to need to have a probate attorney, because you want to make sure that you have someone who has the knowledge to be able to handle your financial affairs as it relates to the courts. But a trust is going to allow you to circumvent that. But the trust doesn't make arrangements for the children, okay? So that's one argument for having both a will and a trust. There are services out there to do a will and a trust for you. You can have an attorney do a will and a trust for you. Hey, Debbie. Oh, thoughts on a power of attorney. I will cover that. That's a good question. Give me 1 second. I'm going to finish up this thought, and then I will talk about the power of attorney real quick. So the trust, you need to have a will and a trust. The trust is going to pass outside of probate. In other words, that the money goes directly to the people you want it to go to. So especially if you only have a little bit of money, you guys, you don't have a huge estate, you still don't want that money going to pay attorney fees. You don't want it being locked up, and you don't want it being tied up. And when you're looking at a will and you're looking at probate, then the assets are tied up. So they're tied up in the courts. So they're not available to pay for your funeral. So even if you have the money to pay for your funeral and it's in a savings account, if you die, they call it intestate. It means without a will. If you die without a will, guess what? That money's tied up. It's not available unless you have your accounts assigned with a payable on death beneficiary or a joint ownership, which again, whole other financial subject, okay? We can cover that another day. Not going to go into it here. But the trust will bypass all of that for you. So Debbie asked the thoughts on a power of attorney. Here's the thing I want everyone to understand about a power of attorney, and I'm glad you asked this because it was not in my notes to cover this today. The rights of a power of attorney cease at death. Okay? So, a power of attorney, what that does is, for those of you who don't know, a power of attorney will give someone while you're alive, so even if you're on life support, as long as you're living and have not been pronounced dead, it will give another individual the rights to be able to act on your behalf in a financial capacity. You can also do a medical power of attorney, which allows that person to make medical decisions on your behalf. Power of attorney rights cease at death. So if you're talking financial planning, and if you're talking post-mortem managing of finances, power of attorney doesn't help you. Doesn't help you at all. Jen, someone on your accounts that can receive information. Okay, so the other question is, if you have someone on your accounts that can receive information so that they can handle stuff, that is basically an authorized signer, authorized user. Has nothing to do at death. That right also ceases. Something happens to you, if you've just been given them authorized signing of rights, those go away at death as well. So the only things that are going to protect you after your death and protect your accounts and your assets after your death is a will and is a trust. Okay? So again, the will is going to be important, super, super, super important if you guys have small kids. I don't care if they're 15 and not really small kids. Hey, Gillette, you still need to have a will in place. Okay? If you have children, put a will. If you flat broke, you still need a will. You need to protect your kids. You need to be able to say where they're going to go. Okay? One thing I will say about the power of attorney, back to that real quick, Debbie, I just had a thought. A power of attorney is helpful because it also allows that person to take over for you while you're alive, but if something happens. So if you're hospitalized or you're incarcerated, okay, then that power of attorney can act on your behalf. So those are some benefits of having the power of attorney. And so when you talk about your financial management and your wealth management, you have to remember it's a multi-level approach. It's not just one thing and you're done. It's not a one and done thing. You have to have numerous things in place, and so that's why it's important to align yourself. I have an Ultimate Power Credit group. I'm constantly putting credit tips in there. We're going to start expanding that more onto just the general realm of finance. So if you guys aren't following Ultimate Power Credit in that group, go ahead and send the request. Join the group today. I'll get you added today because this information is so important. And there are so many things where we think that we're doing the right things, and we are, but it doesn't cover, maybe necessarily it doesn't do the thing that we wanted it to do. So a lot of times people will think that, oh, well, I have a power of attorney, so then that's going to be okay and everything's good if something happens to me. The power of attorney can operate your finances, it can make legal decisions, can sign contracts, can sign mortgage documents, loan papers, all of that as long as you're alive. But the moment you die, power of attorney's rights cease. Okay? The will and the trust is what you need after you die. So how does credit fit into all of this? Okay, we've talked about insurance real briefly. Contact an a licensed insurance agent if you have questions about insurance. We talked about wills and we've talked about trust, but how does credit fit into this? Why am I even bringing credit up when we're talking about this? Okay, so I did some research today just because I was curious, just for my own benefit, what average funerals cost, right? Because we've all seen, like I said, we've seen the GoFundMes, we've seen the car washes, we've seen the chicken dinners, we've seen, auntie ain't getting buried for a good 45 days because everybody got to get the money together, this, that, and other thing. Or you really want to have a burial and a funeral, but you can't afford it, so you have to settle and adjust for that by doing a cremation or something like that. So we're making compromises at death that we don't necessarily have to make if we plan for them during life, okay? And like I said, it sounds morbid, it sounds off maybe to be planning for your own death, but guess what? I said at the very beginning of this, I try to have a conversation with my daughter about it. My adult daughter cannot have this conversation with me, which means it's my job to figure this out. It's my job to put the things in place. It's my job to make sure there's someone there that when I die, she can just be emotional. She can fall apart if she needs to. She can lose it if she needs to. That's my job as her mom, to give her the safe space to do that. How do I do that? By taking the burden away of funeral planning and financial planning and all that kind of stuff. I take that away. So how does credit fit into that? Credit fits into it by giving you access. So when I'm going to look at my notes real quick. So Arizona, and I just kind of did states that I know I have, followers that engage regularly. But Arizona, for instance, average funeral between $7,500 and $13,000. Iowa, $7,000 to $12,500. Texas, $7,100 to $13,000. New York, $11,000 to $20,000. So I want you guys to sit there for a second, marinate on those figures, and look at the death toll of just COVID. 210,000 people means 210,000 families this year. This year, 210,000 families have been faced with this financial quandary. How many of them were fully prepared? Would you be fully prepared if a close loved one, your parent, your child, passed away unexpectedly due to whatever, but let's just stick on COVID because that's, kind of the topic of 2020, right? Would you be prepared? So credit and making sure that your credit score and your credit rating is in such a place that if you need to get financing for the funeral or the last arrangements that you need to make, that you have access to it. You're not walking into the funeral home with $500 saying, what can this get me? And I'm not trying to be callous. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm being so serious right now, you guys. When you think, so I didn't even think about what all goes into this until I really started. I was doing some prep work, like I said, because I'm not in the funeral business, right? So I'm doing some research on funerals. First of all, I'm flabbergasted by those amounts, okay? I'm completely blown away by those amounts. But did you know that they take and break down everything? So there's a fee for the service. There's a fee for the casket. There's a fee for the, the funeral director's, him doing his thing. There's a fee for embalming, a fee for the ceremony, a fee for the transportation. Every single thing that goes into that funeral has a cost. And that cost is going to go from low to hella high, depending on, do you want them going out in a white carriage with a horse and a buggy and it's going to cost. Every little thing that you do costs. And so it's, as parents and as adults, it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to do the things that we can do to have ourselves in the best possible financial situation. And if something happens to us, to leave the ones that are left and our survivors in the best possible situation that they can be in. It's such a hard thing. When I was thinking about those numbers, and I was like, man, Literally 210,000 people. 210,000 people died this year from COVID. We're not going to argue about the numbers or whatever, but 210,000 people. And if only, because we all know we don't all have this stuff in place. We all know we don't. So let's just assume on the high end, 50,000 of them were prepared. That leaves 110 or 105,000 people unprepared and in a financial quandary, unable to maybe pay for final expenses, maybe leaving kids without proper guardians because they didn't know or they didn't take the time to set these things up. Okay? And this was a huge thing for me when I picked the company that I was going to partner with to do my credit business, because they get that. They understand that the company was built, created by attorneys, so they understand all of this, and they understand the need to build a circle around your finances. It's not a one-prong, one-pin approach. There's numerous levels to building wealth. There's numerous levels to managing wealth. And it starts with your access and your education. And I picked the company that I picked because they give both. And that was important to me as a former banker, making sure, because I saw so many times the families coming in and they're not prepared. They're not financially prepared. They're not emotionally prepared. They don't know what to do. They don't know what they can do. They don't know what they can't do. You have to have the education. You have to have the resources. And when we talk about those 5 P's, guys, the process and the positioning. So do you have the position, or do you have the positioning straight? Do you have a will? Do you have a trust? Is there a process? Do you know how to get it? Because if you go to an attorney and have a will or a trust created for you, they could charge you upwards of $1,500. Okay? You can do some stuff online, but again, if you don't understand what it is that you're negotiating when you create your will or you create your trust, guess what? You run the risk of it not doing what you want it to do. A power of attorney is a very, very easy document to execute. Very easy to execute. But you still got to understand, depending on what state you're in, you may have to file that. Okay? You also have to understand how those documents, once you've issued them, how they can be canceled if you need to. I've had clients that have issued power of attorneys to their children and then had a falling out for whatever reason, or their kids got on drugs or something, and guess what? They need to cancel that. You have to understand the whole process, guys, and that's why it's important to align with somebody who gets it and who can help you get into the right direction and get you in front of the right people. That's part of your process, okay? So again, if you're not already part of Ultimate Power Credit Group, I encourage you, go in, join the group. I welcome you with open arms. I promise you. If y'all have other questions, like these were great questions today from Jen and from Debbie, inbox me your questions, guys. We're going to do this every Wednesday. It's my goal to make sure that y'all have the financial education and the access to the information that you need. Again, my company that I partnered with to do my credit franchise and my financial services franchise, that's part of the package, is your will and your trust. Like, you get that with your regular benefits. That's how important that stuff is to have in place, and this is why we get it, and we want to make sure that people are successful in their endeavors and that the financial goals that you have for your life, your relationship, and your business are being met. So that's it for me today. I hope that y'all found some information in here useful today. If you have questions, because I know I kind of went over things really fast because I'm trying to make sure that these lives are not more than 30 minutes. So I'm really trying to stay true to that. So I know I went over it quick. If y'all have questions, don't hesitate to inbox me. Send me a message. If we need to get on the phone, we'll get on the phone. We need to get on a Zoom, we'll get on a Zoom. It really, truly is important to me that y'all have access to the information and the tools and the resources to do the things that you need to do to get yourself in a good financial position. And I'm here to help. 30 years worth of banking, guys. I got you. And the things that I can't do, I have resources. I've got realtors. I've got insurance agents. I've got, the whole team on call, and can get you the information that you need if I don't personally already have it to be able to offer to you. So hope everybody has a great Wealth and Wellness Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in. If you hit me on the replay, drop a hey, say I caught the replay. Just let me know that y'all stopped by. And if you found anything of value in here, please share the video out. I think that the easiest and the best thing that we can do within our communities, because like I said, until we get our money right, we're going to continue to struggle and we're going to stay behind the 8 ball, right? The best thing we can do is help educate our peers and our family members. So please share the video out. DM me if you have questions. And if not, I will let y'all enjoy the rest of your amazing Wednesday. And I will see you next week for next week's Wealth and Wednesday. Have a great day, guys.